Thank you, Jackie. And as Jackie mentioned earlier, we feature one of the college values at each college day, and it gives us an opportunity to have a deep dive in each of those values at that time. And of course, the value we're focusing on today is diversity. And the thing I think that's really cool about the value of diversity is it's so much tied directly to learning. Learning about appreciating different perspectives, different life conditions, different cultures. So I think we're going to have an outstanding and entertaining speaker, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce him. Here are some of the words that people use to describe him. Mr. Andre Cohen, an educator, student, improvisational comedian, speaker, activist, facilitator, coach, mentee, mentor, leader, team member, community organizer, diversity trainer, motivator, friend, and son. But the most representative term is Andre, the enkindled spirit. Please welcome Andre Cohen, President of AM.
So, you can hear me? Yes? All right, great. Well, my name is Andre Cohen, and I have spent 8 years in the classroom as a high school teacher. I currently do some teaching in colleges and universities in the metro area in Minneapolis. And I want to say it is a pleasure and an honor to be in front of you today. And I want to say thank you to the staff who helped make this happen, who helped fold things, who we've had great conversations. So let's give them a hand. And so I'd like to start this presentation, this conversation, the way I typically do in most of my presentations, with taking the temperature of the room. And the way that I take the temperature of the room is, as a high school teacher, I was very motivated by making sure that my students learn. And so I was one of those teachers who would teach to the test. Right? So you get those test scores up. So I would teach to the test. And so to teach to the test, what did I have to give my students? Right? What was on the test? And so we would spend Monday through Thursday working on the things that would be on the test. And on Friday, I would give them a pop quiz. Every Friday, I would give them a pop quiz, and a number of my students were surprised each week. And so I want to give you a pop quiz, but in order to be fair, to give you this pop quiz, I must give you the curriculum. I must give you what I expect of you. And so I will give you the pop quiz, but I will teach you first. And so here is the answer to the pop quiz. Fantastic, terrific, great, all day long, hook. That's the answer to the quiz. So please stand up if you are able. And we'll practice the answer before I give you the quiz. The answer is fantastic, terrific, great, all day long, hook. Very good, very good. So please stay standing. Please stay standing. So here is the quiz. Western Technical College, faculty and staff, how do you feel? just rip the cap off the sucker and tell me how you feel. Western Technical College, how do you feel?
Fantastic! Terrific! Great! All day long! Boom!
Very good, very good. Have a seat, have a seat. Please raise your hand if you felt goofy or silly doing that little cheer. Please raise your hand if you felt goofy or silly doing that cheer. And I want to say, I want to thank most of you for doing it. That was absolutely, that was wonderful. That was wonderful. Yeah, and so that goofiness or that shyness or that embarrassment that people felt in that doing that activity, I want you to keep that in mind, because our students oftentimes feel that kind of vulnerability when they're in front of us. All too often, part of the reason that they come to us is because they are trying to get back what has been stolen from them, which is their humanity, which is their dignity, which is their ability to produce things. And so they come to us in a very vulnerable state. And so when we ask them to do things in the APA style, they're like, that's goofy. What is that? Right? When we're teaching them skills and we spend a whole unit on safety and the importance of wearing eye goggles when you're dealing with machinery and chemicals, they may think that's silly because that's not what my granddad did. Right? And so we have to keep that in mind as we engage our students in that process. And we also have to recognize that we all come from a context. And so we'll spend some time talking about that context and how that relates directly to our students. All right? How many people have been to a diversity training before in some shape, form, or fashion, maybe cultural competence, sensitivity, all that kind of stuff? I will let you know that I personally hate those things. I do. And the reason I typically dislike those types of trainings is because they're hinged on one paradigm, one way of thinking. And the story basically goes like this: that people of color are noble and righteous because they have endured the horrors of the white man. That's usually how the narrative goes, right? But what I would like to suggest to you is, actually, let's do this experiment, all right? I want you to think about a stereotype about another group, right? So these people are thieves, or this group is a group of drunks. These people can dance well, and this group can't jump. So I want you to think about those groups. Now what I'd like for you to do is to take both of your hands, wrap them firmly around your family tree, and shake. Do you have thieves that fall out of your family tree? Do you have drunks that fall out of your family tree? Do you have people who certainly should not be dancing in your family tree? So whatever we can say about another group of people, not only can we say about our own group of people, but we may be able to say about our own families. And so we're so much more alike than we're different. And a lot of those trainings have spent a great deal of time talking about and dealing with our differences. And so today I'd like to kind of have a counter conversation to some of those pieces. All right? So does everybody have their handout? Cool. And does everyone have something to write with? A pen, a pencil, eyeliner, a crayon. And if you have extra, if you could just share with a friend, that would be great. So what I'd like for you to do is we're gonna play a game really quickly. In your handout, there are 5 green circles. What I'd like for you to do is to put down one thing that you value in each one of those green circles. So one thing that you value in each one of those green circles. It could be a concept like freedom or love. It could be a person, a niece, nephew, grandchild. It could be a place like Bemidji or Madison. It could be a thing like a motorcycle or a home. So one thing that you value in each one of those circles, those green circles. One thing that you value. All right. Give just a couple more seconds. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to play a game, and the game is very simple. What I want you to do, so even if you haven't written it down, if you've thought about what those 5 things are, what I'd like for you to do is to find someone else in the room that shares one of those 5 things, and I'd like for them to put their initial next to that circle. What I'd like for you to do is to find 2 people, no one person repeating, so 2 people for each one of those circles. And there's no need to find repeats, so you should be able to find at least 10 people that you can have signed. Hold on, let me give you the last piece. You will have a total of 90 seconds in which to do this. You may begin now.
Seconds, 30 seconds.
So as you were going around the room, were there, first of all, was there anyone that was able to find 10 different people? That was able to get all 10 spots filled? Okay. What was the closest number? 8? All right. Raise your hand if you got 8. All right. Let's give those folks a hand for getting that 8. Great job. Great job. As you were going around the room, were there things that you saw on someone else's paper and you were like, man, why didn't I think of that? Or I could have put that myself. What were some of those things? Yes, sir. Packers over the Vikings. Packers over the Vikings. something. There was something over here. Voting. Oh, voting. Yeah. So voting was something you were like, oh man, I should have put that on my paper. I didn't ask. Was there anyone who was actually participating that was not able to make any connections at all? So everyone was at least able to make a connection or so. Okay, good. Were there also things that were more difficult to find someone to sign on? Were there things that were more difficult? What was one of those things, ma'am? Motorcycles. So please raise your hand if you value or you like motorcycles, even if it wasn't something you wrote down. Raise your hand. Wow. She's like, where were you? All right. What was another thing that someone? Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah. You value your own values. But okay. So for the rest of us. If your values, whatever they are important, specifically, in terms of standing up for them, please raise your hand. If your values are important enough for you to stand up. All right? Great. Can I have one more? Self, right? Please raise your hand if you value yourself. Great. So usually I use this activity in my classroom with my graduate students as well as my high school students. And why do you think I might use an activity like this, particularly at the beginning of a class or beginning of a presentation like today? Why might I use a presentation like this? As an icebreaker, all right? What else? To look at commonalities and find that we are able to connect. Again, we are so much more alike than we are different. But all too often, the contexts that we find ourselves in, particularly the context of the United States, thrives on the fact that we see ourselves as being very different. We suffer from a case of obstacle illusion. Obstacle illusions. And we'll talk more about those obstacle illusions in just a minute. So first and foremost, I want to show a quick video. It's about 3 minutes long. And is anyone familiar with T-Pain? Okay, so the majority of you are not, which is okay. So T-Pain is this musical maestro who creates these tapestries of urban melodic melodies that create this artisan point of view from the urban experience. How to do that? And so he creates these masterpieces. For example, one of the titles of this masterpieces is "I'm in love with a stripper." No, these aren't very good pieces, right? Only to be followed up by his second #1 single, which was "I'm in love with a bartender." So you can kind of see where he's going with that stuff, right? But he uses this computer-animated voice that sometimes that's augmented, and so sometimes it gets difficult to hear. Well, that same, I figured if T-Pain can use it for evil, I could use that computer-animated voice for good. And so you'll notice that the computer-animated voice is in this particular presentation. There are also subtitles if it's distracting to listen to that computer-animated piece, but the kids dig it. It's just, I don't think they say dig it anymore. I think it's toe cray. But if you're over 30, don't try it. So here we go.
Let us rise up tonight with a greater readiness. Let us stand with a greater determination. Let us move on in these powerful days. These days of challenge to make America what it ought to be. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing anything. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. 1960, students all over the South started sitting in at lunch hours. And I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream. And taking the whole nation back to those great realms of democracy, which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing anything. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. 1962, the Negroes in Albany, Georgia, decided to straighten their backs up. And whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they are going somewhere, because a man can't ride your back and let it in bed. 1963, black people in Birmingham, Alabama, aroused the conscience of this nation and brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. Later that year in August, I would try to tell America about a dream that I had. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. But I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing anything. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Who? Martin Luther King. Now, I would suggest to you that there is a part that we of Dr. King that we typically don't speak about that is crucial for understanding the courage that this particular individual had and the folks who were part of his movement. And that was the fact that not only was he a doctor, but more importantly, he was a reverend. He was a reverend. And so when we think about what those implications are for him, I wonder what might give someone the courage to know that you are being civilly disobedient, that you are breaking unjust laws, but you are breaking laws nonetheless. What might give one the courage to know that you are going to meet, you are going to assemble with other brothers and sisters with the recognition that the powers that be, the police, the sheriff, the National Guard in some cases, will be there with weapons and dogs and billy clubs to beat you down, yet you still show up. What might give you that courage? I just wonder. And I also wonder, why does Dr. King use phraseology or words like mountaintop or promised land? Why do you think he uses those kinds of words as he's talking, giving this speech? It was what? It was biblical. He was staying on brand, right? It would be difficult for me to believe that you believe in your brand if you work for Energizer and you keep buying Duracells. So he was staying on brand, so to speak. And so he believed that so much. And so what I find very interesting about this particular speech, what speech was this that he was delivering? I have a dream speech. So if, I want you, you don't have to respond to this, you don't have to answer, but I want you to think about all the speeches that you know that Dr. King gave. And if you come up with one, you have work to do. You have work to do. The irony that I find in this particular speech is that this is called his mountaintop speech. This was the last speech that Dr. King gave. He gave this on a Sunday night. He woke up Monday morning to catch an assassin's bullet in the neck. And so one of the things that sends chills down my spine is that he says, I might not make it, but what? We will. We will make it. Did he say black people will make it? Did he say Hmong people will make it? Did he say white people will make it? He said, no, we will make it. Now, the one thing that people, don't necessarily understand is oftentimes when they hear civil rights or they think about civil rights, they think just about black or brown people. But Dr. King was fighting for civil rights for everyone. See, when he was in Memphis, before he was assassinated, he went down to help garbage sanitation workers with their strike. And the sanitation workers were not just black people. They were white people. They were working class people. Dr. King said it's time for this movement to move beyond what other people think and help to restore people's humanity. So he uses a tool that he knows, which is his spiritual religious faith, to try to teach us some basic principles. And so as he talks about the promised land and he talks about the mountaintop, I find it ironic that the story he's trying to relate to us is a story that he is a part of. You see, he tried to mirror the civil rights struggle with the epic struggle of Judeo-Christian beliefs. That the Charlton Heston movie lived out in real life. Charlton Heston, the Ten Commandments. Let my people go out of my cold, dead head. No, that's his NRA speech. I get those right? So what Dr. King was saying is that I might make it to the promised land, just like Moses didn't make it to the promised land, but ultimately the people did make it to the promised land. And once they got to the promised land, they had new leadership. And the new leadership had some problems with Moses' people. Because Moses' people kept saying, when Moses was here, we'd have a pillar of fire, or we'd have a pillar of smoke, or we'd have bread that fell from the sky. We'd have quail that was so much that we couldn't eat it all. What's wrong with you guys? And so finally the new leadership, Joshua and Caleb, stood up in front of the people and they made this one declaration and then they walked off the stage. They said, people, Moses is dead. Dead. And they walked off the stage. Why did they need to make that declaration? Why they need to Marco? Why did they need to make that declaration? Because they were living in the past. It's time to move on. You're on your own, baby. I mean this with the most sincerity and the most reverence, but I have to say it, that Dr. King, Reverend Dr. King, is dead. Mother Teresa is dead. Gandhi is dead. Nelson Mandela is dead. Are they coming back? I would say probably not. But will there be another king? Will there be another Mother Teresa? Will there be another Gandhi? Will there be another Desmond Tutu? Well, once he passes, will there be another Stephen Biko who has passed? Yes, there will be. But guess who they will be? They will be you. So, you know what? Other people's liberty is trapped behind our embarrassment. How many times have you been in a public place or you've seen some kind of episode and you just shake your head and you're like, that was not right? Anybody been in that situation where you just shake your head and go, I cannot believe it just happened? How many times have you don't have to respond to this, said something about it? See, I was at a dollar store. I like the dollar store, although I get tricked. I get tricked. Because you go into the dollar store and everything is $1. So you think you can buy 50 of them because it's just $1. Not realizing that you just spent $50. What's that? It's worse than Target. So I'm at the dollar store and I picked up some movies, and there was an African American couple in front of me, and the young lady had on pajama pants and house shoes and a silk wrap. The young man had his pants hanging low, and you can see like all underwear, the 4 pair of underwear that he's wearing, and he's got like this muscled t-shirt on and a hat cocked to the side and whatnot. And so I'm standing in there, and the store is crowded, just packed. And so so they're standing there, and the lady had grabbed an apple juice, so she put the apple juice up on the counter, and something distracted the guy, so he's looking over at something, and she takes out her EBT card. And she's in a mid-swipe of her EBT card, or her SNAP card, I think is more referred to now, right? So she swipes this government-issued card, and the guy turns around, and he was like, "You stupid, boop. How the boop are you going to use that EBT card? You and all this stuff." And so he's just going off on this lady, full throttle, finger pointing, ultra masculine kind of posturing and all this kind of stuff. And it really surprised me because guess what she said? Nothing. Which led me to believe that what? Was this the first time this has happened? No. And so I'm standing there and I'm saying what everybody else is saying in the store, which is what? None of my business. None of my business. And then the voice speaks. I don't know if you guys have this voice, but I always have this voice that encourages me to be braver than I really am. It encouraged me to do stuff that I wouldn't normally do, right? So the voice speaks, and the voice says, "Say something." I said, "Are you crazy?" The people are looking around at me. I'm like, right? So I make a deal with the voice. So I say, "Voice, if they're still in the parking lot, by the time I'm done with my transaction, I will say something." So I'm taking my time. Right? So I do I finish my transaction, I head out the door, and lo and behold, they're out in the parking lot. And so I start making my way towards them, and then he takes a call. And I'm like, can't do it now, because he's on the call. But I said, "Voice, if he gets off the phone before I get to my car, I'll say something," right? And so I'm walking, and I'm trying not to look, right? But I start walking towards my car, and then he gets off the phone. By this time, they're in front of a grocery store, and they're heading into the grocery store. So I've made this deal with the voice, so I'm going to do it. So I walk in behind them, but I'm smarter than to attack somebody from behind, talking about, "I want to talk to you," right? It's just not a good idea. So I go around an aisle, and I meet them kind of face to face, this family unit. Now, I want you to know that I don't do this on a regular basis. I have no idea what to say. And all of a sudden, the voice decides it wants to get quiet. It was giving me all these directions before, but now it wants to be quiet. So I'm standing here, and I'm like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. And then the voice says, "Open your mouth." So I open my mouth, and I said, "Sir, can I talk to you just for a second?" And he was like, "What do you want? What?" And I was like, it's all good, sir. Just want to talk to you for a second. If you can just take a step over here. And that was the social cue to let the baby and the mom know that they should, give us a little bit more space. And so I'm standing there with this guy, and the voice had told me to open my mouth, but the voice didn't give me anything to say. So I'm standing there, and I'm looking at this dude, and he was like, "What?" And I was like, "It's all good, dude. I just want to share you something. I just want to share with you something that I learned." And so then I opened my mouth, and I said, "Sir, I would like to just give you something that I've learned about women. If you want them to grow, you have to give them sunshine and you have to water them." I had to repeat that because I had no idea what that meant. I was like, what is going on? And so I repeated it back to him. And I said, "Do you know what I mean?" And I had to ask that question because I didn't. I was like, "Do you know what that means?" And he went, and all these scales fell off of him. He deflated. And he said, "Yeah, I do." And I said, "Great, have a great day. I will see you later." And I went off on my business. And it took me a long time to figure out why it was that I did that. Because I wasn't even clear why the voice, told me to go do this. And one of the things that I learned and I realized was that what the voice wanted me to do was interrupt something in that child's life. Because if we don't make a difference in those children's lives, then we continue these what we say in my faith community, generational curses, generational poverty, generational ways of thinking that don't produce the best of our humanity. And so it's up to each and every one of us in our sphere of influence to speak up in whatever way we can. I'm not saying you need to confront someone the way I confronted them. I'm also in the grocery store looking at this woman, and there was a woman whose primary language was Spanish, and she had a cart full of groceries with 5 kids in the candy aisle. And so she's trying to negotiate with the woman at the register, getting her groceries in. She's trying to negotiate keeping the candy out the cart, and it's taking a little while to get all this done. Now, the woman in front of me does not have the same level of awareness or patience that I do. And so she does something that my grandmother calls acting ugly. So she stands there. I wish these people would. Why don't they? Right, all this mumbling stuff that she obviously wants someone to hear so that they can agree with her foolishness. But I'm a diversity trainer. I'm an educator. I know how to deal with this. I have handouts in the car. I have my PowerPoint ready, so I can just bring this in and give her a training. Right? But I don't do that. This is what I do. And this is something that I learned from my students. That as much as people want to be on America's Next Top Model or the Great American Bachelor or, Please Be My American Idolatry, whatever the show, as much as people want to be on those reality shows, nobody likes to be watched. So I did this. When I coughed like that, what happened to her behavior? It stopped. Why did it stop? Because someone noticed her. I didn't have a chance to go into a big dissertation. I didn't have, time to do any therapy with her. But I did stop and make her think about her behavior. And so when we talk with our students, when we interact, we have to remember that everything that we do is impactful and important to our students. Our opinions are important to our students. So we have to be aware of what opinions we have. We'll continue on. Context is everything. Why are these guys not around? Why are they not around? They could not adapt to the new context. Right? And so in the United States, we operate in a particular context. Why do we get to have diversity conversations? Why do we get to talk about inclusion? Because we live on one of the greatest democracy, one of the greatest nations that ever existed on the face of the planet. The United States of America. I love her. That's why I pay taxes. And vote. Right? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If that doesn't get your heart pumping, you're dead. And it's funny, because when I read these words and I think about what these words mean for me and the generations to follow, some people say, well, you know what? When they wrote that, they weren't talking about you. That's what people say. People say that. And then I go back to them and I say, well, if they weren't talking about me, they should have never let me learn how to read, and they never should have wrote it down. The preamble to the Constitution, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, we do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. Right? So this, you cannot be more patriotic than reading and understanding these rights and these responsibilities. In 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, doing what for whom? Freeing the slaves. Freeing the slaves. Freeing the slaves. What is a slave? It is a thing. The people who were captured and put into the economic system called slavery, were they things? They were not things. They were human beings. They had hopes and dreams and aspirations that the system of slavery did not allow them to explore. And so in our classes, when we talk about these particular units and we talk about this part of history, we can no longer say that these people were slaves. We have to say that they were people in the system of slavery. People first. People first. In 1920, August 18th, women got the right to vote. Yay! Right? In 1923, Native American Citizenship Act was signed, giving citizenship rights to Native Americans in 1923. Pause for the irony. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act was signed, giving what to whom? July 7th, 1964, the Act outlawed segregation in businesses such as theaters, restaurants, and hotels. It banned discriminatory practices in employment and ended segregation in public places such as swimming pools, libraries, and public schools. For who? Everyone. For everyone. So discrimination was over in 1964. Woo! Okay, nobody's throwing a party with me. In 1970, the Native American Freedom of Religion Act was signed, which meant that now that they had citizenship in 1923, they could now worship the way that they had for thousands of years without any political or any negative effects on their status. Native Americans were being jailed and sometimes hung for practicing their religious beliefs, which is another irony given how we started as a country of religious freedoms, but we'll keep going. In 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed and did what for people with disabilities? What did it do? It included them in every activity that everybody else was included in, right? And so it gave them the recognition of all the rights that everybody else already had. And so the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so this is the context that we operate in. The one thing that I loved about the election of President Barack Obama was what did not happen. There were a lot of people who did not like that particular outcome, but what did not happen, because we're one of the greatest democracies, if not the greatest, what did not happen?
Armed revolution.
There was no revolution. There was no mass, burnings of anything. There was no mass craziness. What we said as Americans is, you won this one, I'll get you next time. I'll make it happen next time, because we believe so much in the rule of law that is what's able to hold our country together, where other countries would have fallen apart with that level of division. So let's talk about some of the truths about human beings. And these are some things that we innately know as teachers, faculty members, and support staff. That human beings can learn, change, and grow. Who I am today is not who I was at 17. Thank God. Woo. So human beings can learn, change, and grow. People do what they think works, even when what? Even when it doesn't, or even when they're proven wrong. Right? So people don't do things, or it doesn't matter if I understand why they do things. I need to understand that they do these things because they think that they work. And why do they think that these things work, even when they don't? How do we build our learning? We build our learning on failures or successes. For the most part, successes. Right? We can learn from failures, but for the most part, we try to do behaviors that are successful. And so if I have a set of behaviors that has worked for me in the past, when I see a similar situation, where am I going to reach for a response to that situation? I'm going to reach back to those old behaviors, use them in the present, and I will plan to use them in the future as well. So the past, the present, and the future builds our scaffolding for learning. All human behavior is goal-directed. I find it funny that parents, grandparents will ask a child who's just stolen a cookie or a piece of candy, they will ask them, why did you do that? And typically, what is the child's response? I don't know. But what they're saying is, I don't know why you're asking me that. You know I wanted the cookie. Right? So all human behavior is goal-directed. People are trying to get something through their behavior. And lastly, an attitude is a response to a goal. An attitude is not a thing. It is a side effect. It is smoke and mirrors of something that is more real. How many of you have been taught about what an attitude is, or been accused of having an attitude? Anyone? Anybody got an attitude now? So just a few words. What is an attitude, or how does one know that one has an attitude? Posture, so something about your physical demeanor says that you have an attitude. What else is an attitude? It's a tone in your voice, the way you say things. All right? What else? One more thing that an attitude is. It is a feeling. It's an emotional state that one has. Now, I will submit to you that all of those are great answers, but they were incomplete for my parents. Because my parents would say crazy stuff to me like, boy, you better fix your attitude. My mother was good for saying, boy, you better fix your face. And then I go, and she'd send me to my room. But my dad would just cut straight to the chase, and he'd say, boy, you better go to your room till you learn how to act. So I'd be in my room for a while, then I step out into the hallway. To be ought not to be. I spent a lot of time in my room. Because that's not what they were talking about, an attitude. And it didn't hit me until I was 17 what an attitude was. See, my dad was my pastor. I grew up in the church, and I was a preacher's kid. And so on Sunday, we would go to church from 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. We stopped at 3 o'clock for chicken, not because we're black, but because chicken is delicious. So all day Sunday. So Friday night, I asked my dad for the car, and because my dad loves me, what does he say? No. He loves me. He says, yes. So I get the keys. I'm hanging out with my friends. I fill the car up with gas. I come home before curfew. I toss my dad the keys, and my dad says, I have what kind of an attitude? A good attitude, a positive attitude. What do I say about my dad's attitude? That he's also got a good attitude. So Friday night, my dad and I are cool. Sunday, my best friend Dexter calls me at noon and says, Andre, can you pick me up for the movies? What do I know about Sunday? Church all day. But I'm 17, I'm invincible, and Jesus is my friend. So I go up to my dad and I say, Dad, can I borrow the car? And what does my dad say? Not only does he say no, but he gives me a sermon about how I'm leading people to hell. Every negative consequence in my household, the ultimate consequence was that you were going to hell. And either you could go to hell on your own, or my parents were more than happy to show you the way. As a result of that interaction with my father, I would say he had what kind of an attitude? A bad attitude. Therefore, he would also say that I had what? A bad attitude. So what is it that actually determines an attitude? What is an attitude? What I would suggest is look at your own family. Has there been a time when a young person has come up to you, or maybe you've been that young person, and you've gone to an adult and you said, dear, kind, and precious adult, may I please attend Cindy Whitmore's party? It starts in 5 minutes. And the adult is thinking about all the chores you haven't done, the relationships you've had with your younger siblings, the fact that your grades are suspect at best, and the parent looks down and says, no, you can't go to Cindy's party. What is wrong with you? You and your brother have been fighting, your chores aren't done, so what happens to the child's attitude? The child transformed into some kind of gargoyle monster, but you're like, what are you? And they're storming, and they go to their dungeon and they close the door too firmly. But then the adult is thinking, they say, you know what, I'm thinking about this. Maybe, I'm being a little harsh. Maybe it's okay. So the adult goes to the dungeon door and knocks on the door. Boom, boom, boom. And the monster inside goes, ready, alive! And the adult says, you know what, I was thinking, your brother has been a pain in the butt lately. We've talked about your grades, and you can do your chores when you get back. You can't stay for all of Cindy's party, but you can stay for an hour and a half. What happens to that gargoyle monster that's in that dungeon room? It transforms back into that child and has a good attitude. So the determiner of an attitude is goal accomplishment. So if you have a student in your classroom who has a bad attitude, what do you know about them for sure? They are not what? Reaching their goal. They're not reaching their goal. And what's the easiest way to help them to have a good attitude is to help them get their goal. Also, what if their goal isn't something that you can do or they don't have the resources for? Your second job is to help them find a new goal. Help them find a new goal. Because if I give them a goal, what's going to be their reaction to that? They're going to push back. Just like many of us are doing very well with our New Year's resolution diets. I'll see you in 2 more weeks. Right? And so ultimately, what are people's goals? What are humans going for? What is it that the human condition is yearning for? It is yearning for significance, it is yearning for belonging, and it is yearning for safety. Why are students coming to us? Because they believe that we can give them the skills to secure their significance, their belonging, and their safety. Significance says that I have purpose and power and that I can produce something. Belonging says that I can be in networks and communities of people who can understand what I'm worth. And safety says that those communities and those relationships that I'm in will be physically, mentally, emotionally safe enough for me to live out those first two. So we're all yearning for safety, significance, and belonging. But all too often, our methods are sometimes faulty or we have poor methods. I love the story of Beauty and the Beast. I use it in my work. I think Dr. King alluded to this concept of Beauty and the Beast when he says, I've come to an understanding that disturbs me greatly. We have fought hard and long for integration, as I believe we should have, and I know we will win. But I've come to believe that we're integrating into a burning house. What Dr. King was saying was there are some things that are systemically wrong with the United States, and it's because we're in a bad relationship. Did you know that the story of Beauty and the Beast is the classic example of a domestic violence situation? Think about it, right? So the man kidnaps the woman's father and ransoms her father for her, and then bosses her around the house, tells her what she can eat, what she can wear, where she can go, and then wants affection from her. The question was, is that bad? And so when we think about the United States, and one of the things that in my classes, students will often ask me is they say, well, can't we just all be Americans? When will we get to the point where we're just all Americans? And I will say we will get to that place when we resolve all of our hurt, when we've talked about all of our hurt. Here's a couple of examples of that. Just the power and control wheel, domestic violence and power and control wheel, which is referred to as the Duluth model. It talks about that when folks are in power or in this domestic particular situation, I want you to think about this in a larger scale of things, that they use things like coercion and intimidation, economic abuse. So not necessarily giving people what they need to be self-sustaining economically. They use the concept of privilege. Children become pawns in this game, that they begin to minimize and blame and deny the victim as if it is their fault that they're in that situation. They also use the isolation as a way of manipulating people to stay in this, this abusive relationship. And they use emotional abuse. So here are some, so context is everything. And context is about time, it's about space. Context and culture are directly related. Culture comes out of the context, and it is supported by thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, and emotions. Context and culture are relational. Culture is a group's method of adapting to the context that they find themselves in. Right? And so here's a quick story about that. It was funny. I was listening to this conversation between these two women. One was a younger Somali woman and an older white Norwegian woman. And the Somali woman was wearing her hijab. And the older white woman looked over at the young lady and said, "Ma'am, isn't that head wrap?" And the young lady said hijab, and the woman said hijab. She said, "Isn't that hijab hot?" And the young Somali woman looked at her and kind of laughed, and she said, "Ma'am, I'm from Africa, and Africa is hot." Right? And so these cultural differences that we think that we have more to do with the context that we're in than they actually do with what is different about us. So looking at these optical illusions, it's important for us to realize and recognize that race is one of these optical illusions.
Number one.
How many people have had something stolen from them? Please raise your hand if you had something stolen. All right, cool. Yeah, I just want to make sure that misery loves company, all right? So anyone had a car stolen? Okay, cool. What kind of car was that? Okay, so a 95 Pontiac Grand Am. Do you know what color it is? It was blue. Okay, so what would happen if you woke up Monday morning and saw that your Pontiac Grand Am was gone? What would you do? What would be your process? What did you do? What did you do? You call the police, and what did the police come and do? They took a report, and then they went back to doing whatever it was they were doing, right? The police are really good at reports. I don't know if I was hoping when my car was stolen, I was hoping they'd have a magnifying glass, just a fingerprint test. I mean, that's why CSI, they should be able to do something like that, right? Yeah, so that typically doesn't happen. But what would happen if you came home Tuesday morning and saw your stolen car in your neighbor's driveway, or driving space, in their parking lot? What would you do then? Anyone? Go take it back, call the police, okay? All right. So you go try to take it back, and they have big Doberman and Rottweilers and all sorts of stuff, and a big guy named Brutus who comes to stop you. And you say to your neighbor, "That's my car." Your neighbor says, "It's not your car." So you bring your title and that kind of stuff. You take them to court. You go to court and you say to the judge, "Judge, here's my paperwork. This is my car." The judge looks at your paperwork, looks at your neighbor's stuff, and he says to your neighbor, "Neighbor, this is now your car." He looks at you and says, "You've lost the statute of limitations of ownership are up. This is no longer your car." How do you feel about your neighbor? Not very good. How do you feel about the judicial system? Not very good. Now, here's the clincher. Now the springtime comes and your neighborhood decides to have a car show. Your neighbor comes across the street and says, "Look, I've got this blue Pontiac Grand Am that I want to put in the community car show. Will you help me polish it?" What do you say to your neighbor? You say, "No." Do you want anything to do with that car show? No. This is what we describe as historical trauma for Native Americans. Can you imagine having all of your resources stolen, being used to someone else's benefit, and then parceled back out to you as fishing rights, as meager hunting rights? So when will we become fully Americans? When we're able to have conversations like this and talk about how we include people in creating an equitable environment. A couple more things. One of the things that I'm really not concerned about is the state of black people. One of the things that I recognize is that in 1863, people were in the system of bondage, the system of slavery, were freed. In 1964, they got full rights. How many years is that? It's 101 years. Now, when Dr. King was making the march and working with others to establish this civil rights movement, some people were saying to Martin, "You're moving too fast." So after 101 years, we had this game of catch-up. And what I would submit to you, what kinds of things happened in our country in that 101 years? Were universities set up in that 101 years? Were businesses set up in that 101 years? Were states added to the Union in that 101 years? I would like to think of that particular 101 years as our dark ages, pun intended. Because not everyone had equal access to goods, jobs, services, and money in that 101 years. And so however great I think I am, I come out of a context. And if my context says that half of my brothers and sisters did not have access to goods, jobs, services, and money in that 101 years, and my ancestors did have access to goods, job, services in that 101 years. It begs the question, am I as good as I think that I am, or do I just have a head start? And so in another 101 years, I know that black folks will rise up and be able to give everything that everyone else is able to give to this great country. But it's going to take some time. And what we don't need is additional people throwing additional roadblocks, fearing that folks will take away stuff that they think belongs to them, when it all belongs to all of us, because all of us don't want the same things. The last obstacle illusion is this concept of whiteness. And whiteness really hurts white people. Because whiteness takes this assumption that all white people are equal. And all white people are not equal. You can listen to white people themselves tell you this. What do white people call white people who do not measure up to the level of sophistication that most white people think they should? They call them white trash. They call them rednecks. There you go. Right? They call them riggers. They call them, there's some of the insane clown posse or something there's a name for that stuff, right? Juggalos, right? So, and if you don't know, ask your brothers and sisters. But that concept of whiteness is problematic. It is problematic for this very reason. That in our typical way of thinking about race and thinking about individuals, we think about it in terms of this evolutionary process, where one group of people typically is on the right end and other folks are somewhere in the middle. Just a quick piece in these three women. What's the first woman's racial or ethnic background? What would you say? Scandinavian. All right. What about the woman in the middle? She's what?
Caribbean.
From the Caribbean. Okay. And lastly, the other woman. Asian, maybe. Okay. Cool. Yeah, and many of you have caught it that all three of these images are exactly the same person with different skin colors. And so we are so much more alike than we are different. But it is those differences that become the obstacle illusion of our human relations, of our ability to work with and be with one another. One of the things we also have to recognize is that this concept of animal farm. I would imagine that most of us have read that at some point, particularly in middle school, right? And I don't know if you've noticed, but free-range chickens seem to be more expensive in the grocery store than conventional raised chickens. And why do you think that is? Why are free-range chickens so much more expensive than traditional chickens?
Harder to catch.
They're hard to catch. Because they're coming from a farmer. They're hard to catch. What else? The cost of raising them is higher. What else? The volume. So they're raised in these open spaces. They have individualized kind of attention. And they're raised more humanely, quote unquote. Right? It's a more humane way to raise chickens. Whereas the caged chickens are typically in close quarters. They don't have the opportunity to move around. They can't flex their muscles. They're subjected oftentimes to violence. Their beaks either get clipped or they have to wear these funny little glasses so they don't cannibalize themselves. They're in these tight quarters where there's feces and debris and antibiotics as a part of that stuff. And one might say that the free-range chickens have privilege. The privilege of seeing the sun and walking around and whatnot. And that the caged chicken may not necessarily have that they're being denied privileges. But whether you are a free-range chicken or a caged chicken, whether you have these so-called privileges or you're denied these so-called privileges, On the animal farm, what is the destiny of the chicken on that farm? Sunday, 3 o'clock. That was good. And so one of the things we have to remind ourselves is that as we work with our students, as we work with each other as faculty members, that no matter what privileges that we have, it is in our best interest to make sure that we are lifting up everyone's humanity. On the back of your handout is this motto or this creed that I've begun to live by, which is the fact that there is dignity and honor in being human. What is dignity? What is dignity? Is it something that you have or something that you give? It is in fact both. One of the things that I give freely to people who hold those signs on the entryways is dignity. Every now and then I will give a sandwich card or some kind of food card so they can go buy whatever they want on their own. But more often than not, I give them the dignity of a smile. I give them dignity of a conversation. I let them know that you are a part of the human family and I see you. I give them dignity. What is honor? What is honor? On my honor I will try. Right? Yes, sir. Respect. Honor is the highest level of respect that we reserve for people who have done things on our behalf that we could not do for ourselves. We give them honor. Men and women who serve in the armed services, we give them honor. We give our foreparents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, we give them honor because they did things for us that we could not do for ourselves. And what I would submit is that I should be giving my students honor because I could not be here without them. Literally. We would say something goofy. We taught in a year-round school, and the year-round school, we had breaks throughout the year, and when we had 2-week breaks without students, we'd say something really goofy. I can get a lot done without the students here. No, the students are my job. And they are also my humanity. I believe that human beings cannot be human beings unless 2 things are present. One is that we are in direct relationship with other people, and then secondly, that we're in the service of them. That's where humanity comes in. Next is being. So there's dignity, there's honor in being human. Please raise your hand if you either passed the test or you purchased a ticket that made you eligible to be born. None of us have done anything to bring ourselves here. We all accepted an invitation. I don't want to think about how the invitation came. It's disgusting. But we all accepted an invitation, and we're trying to figure out what it means to be human. And human is very interesting because it is an adjective and it is also a noun. The noun being a biped, having opposable thumbs, a big brain, and a belly button. If you ever encounter a person without a belly button, be concerned. Homo sapiens sapien, the ones who know that they exist. A human is also an adjective. And how is it that we describe our humanity? What do we teach the smallest of our species, our nieces and nephews, children, grandchildren? What do we teach them about what it means to be human? What do we teach them? What's that? That we should respect one another. What else? We have compassion for other people. Something else? That people have feelings. That we make mistakes. We bounce back. We're resilient. We give when people don't give back to us. We do these things. We build up our humanity by being in the service of other people. I would like to encourage you as we close this particular session that don't just think of yourself as being an employee of the school, but I want you to think of yourself as someone who is breaking the chains of poverty off of people's lives. That not only are you impacting the student that is in front of you, but you're helping them make generational changes that will shape the nature of our existence as human beings. When I think about those awesome responsibilities, when I sweep the floor, I got a little extra pep when I sweep the floor, because I know I'm changing somebody's life. I'm changing the nature of our humanity. When I slip up and I say things or I think things that I ought not think, I come down on myself a little bit harder, because it's important that I'm raising our humanity and not diminishing it. My name is Andre Cohen, and I really appreciate being with you today. Thank you.
Thank